Hello, my name is John Winter. I'll be the moderator for this evening's forum. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody here this evening. The Chamber of Commerce in Lloydminster and right across Canada is a nonpartisan organization. We take our responsibility to our members and our community very seriously, and for that reason, we regularly host forums for candidates running in municipal, provincial, or federal elections. All provincial parties with a candidate running in the Lloydminster riding has been invited to attend and participate in the forum this evening. I'm pleased to welcome the candidates here tonight. Thank you for taking the time. Sorry, technological difficulties here. Sorry about that. We're very fortunate to live in a country where we have the right and privilege to vote for our leaders. I'd also like to thank the Lloydminster Exhibition Association and staff for hosting this evening. Their support and participation makes it possible for us to carry out this important function, and we're fortunate indeed to have this fine facility to host our events. Up here tonight doing the question collation is Chamber President Paul Melrose Wyatt and Chamber Past President Corrine Kelly Hyde. Our timer tonight is Serena Shadeen, and our floor assistant is Terry Lynn Mackey. Some of you may be familiar with our chamber and how we run our forums. Due to COVID-19, we do have a few changes from our regular procedures. However, generally, we still operate the same. We do not have an in-person audience this evening. We are live streaming our forum tonight through the Chamber website and social media pages. We also have secured local media partners to send out the live stream, including 106.1 The Goat, Lloyd Connect, Primetime Local News, and we'd like to thank Maz Entertainment for doing our live stream. For viewers at home that would like to submit questions to our candidates, I would ask that you use skforum@lloydminsterchamber.com to send all questions. That is skforum@lloydminsterchamber.com. For the new candidates and for the audience, I'll outline some guidelines for our forum. First of all, I'd like to declare the forum officially called to order. First off, each candidate will have 4 minutes to introduce themselves and comment on some important areas of their platform. The order of speaking has been determined by drawing names out of a hat. The timekeeper, Serena, will keep track on a stopwatch, which will be on the screen right here for the candidates. Typically, we do a 30-second ding. We won't be doing the 30-second ding just because you have the visual of the screen to see. So there will be a ding when the time is up. We ask that each candidate adhere to the time limits in order to give everyone equal opportunity to speak. Once each candidate has spoken, we'll begin addressing the questions that have come to us via email. We ask that your questions from the viewers be specific and addressed to a particular candidate. We'll not read a long preamble to a question, so in order to have your question addressed, they must be concise and to the point. Candidates will then be given 2 minutes to respond to the questions, with the bell ringing when the time is up. 1 minute will be allowed for rebuttals if needed, and then at the end of the questions, candidates will be given 3 minutes for a wrap-up, and the order of the wrap-up will be opposite of the introductions. So once again, viewers at home, email to send questions to is skforum@lloydminsterchamber.com. With that being said, we will now start with Steve from the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan.
Thank you, John. My name is Steve Gessner. I am your Buffalo Party candidate for Lloydminster. A little bit about myself. I was born in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. I moved to the Battlefords with my farm family when I was 5, and have lived in this area my entire life. Grew up on that farm. When I left the farm at the age of 20, I went into the construction field, got into heavy equipment operation, which taught me how to build a road and maintain it. I, at that point, got interested in the transportation world, and then got involved with a what turned out to be a 30-year career in that end of the world. Spent about 5 years hauling crude oil in this local oil patch area, and then hit the highway. I've spent almost 25 years traveling around North America, seeing what there is to see, doing what I had to do. And I can honestly say that I've been everywhere. If it's a jurisdiction in North America, I've been there. I've seen what works. I've seen what doesn't work. And I think I can take a pretty level education through that to fill this position for the people of Lloydminster constituency. I don't believe that this is going to take me 4 minutes, because I really haven't got a whole lot more to say about this, other than the fact that Saskatchewan has been my lifelong home. It's always been wonderful to come back to it, having spent time in Texas for a week, having been on the eastern seaboard, Alaska, wherever. It's always great to see that sign that says, "Welcome to Saskatchewan." I'm proud to call this home, and I believe it's my turn to give something back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Next, representing the New Democratic Party of Saskatchewan, Colleen Henning.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be representing the NDP party, and and because of that, I have a tendency to talk a lot about all the wonderful policies and plans we have for Saskatchewan. But tonight I'm going to do things a little bit differently, and I'm going to use this introduction time to tell you about myself. I don't usually talk about myself much when I'm out on the campaign trail. My name is Colleen Morell Henning. I was born and raised in Lloydminster, and I've lived here for 48 years. I've lived mostly in the city of Lloyd, but as a young person, I also lived and worked on a farm near Lloyd. And I feel that because of those experiences, I understand this riding well. Its people, passions, and economics, both past and present, and also the issues that face us here as we as a riding grow and change to meet current and future challenges. I graduated from the Lloydminster Comprehensive High School back in 1980. And those of you who have lived here as long as me might recall that my dad was the principal of that school then. He'd lived here about 25 years, but my mom had lived here even longer. My roots here run that deep. I next attended Lakeland College in business and went to work in Lloydminster for a public practice accounting firm. I kept studying accounting while working full-time for a few years, then decided to move to Edmonton to complete a Bachelor of Arts degree. After I convocated, I worked in Fort McMurray and Edmonton in human services, social work, community corrections, and rehabilitation work, before returning to Lloyd. During my time in Fort McMurray, I worked extensively with Indigenous communities there and throughout northern Alberta, ties, and I eventually developed strong personal and family ties to Indigenous communities in northern Alberta, ties which now connect me to the Indigenous community in Lloydminster. When I moved back to Lloydminster in 1991, I spent the next 10 years continuing my accounting studies, working in human services and accounting, and raising my 2 children. Those years I spent balancing diverse jobs and responsibilities gave me a unique understanding of the lives of people in Lloydminster and area, and of how social and economic factors affect those lives. I also came to see how these factors are affected at every turn by the choices of municipal, provincial, and federal governments, which led me to become more involved in politics and community action. That's when I started volunteering for the Saskatchewan New Democrats. In 2001, I returned to university to fulfill a lifelong dream and become a teacher. After I got my B.Ed, I began to work at Holy Rosary High School in Lloyd, and I still work there now. I find great fulfillment working with students, sharing in their joys and struggles. While working at Holy, I also attended the U of S, earned a master's in educational admin. Besides classroom teaching, I've worked for my division as an assessment specialist and presently as a coordinator of at-home learning. Also, while I've lived in Lloyd, I've been an active volunteer for many causes. Fundraising for a school playground, treasurers for nonprofits like the Lloydminster Social Action Coalition, the Fringe, a local church. I was president, vice president for the Lloydminster Teachers Association, and I believe that my strong work ethic and commitment to this community have been amply demonstrated by my work, volunteer, and educational history. Now, as the NDP candidate for Lloydminster, I will focus this same wholehearted drive on being the MLA that Lloydminster riding needs and deserves.
Thank you, Colleen. And last we'll have Colleen Young with the Sask Party.
Good evening, everyone. I was born and raised on a family farm in a large family of 12 children 25 miles east of Saskatoon. I was raised with a hard work ethic and strong family values and morals. My husband and I have called Lloydminster home for the past 34 years and have raised and educated our 8 children in this community. I have always been very involved in my community, sitting on many boards, fundraising for a variety of causes, attending and speaking at many events. My 20 years as a trustee on the public school board gave me significant insight into the many challenges faced by a bi-provincial community. Since being elected in 2014, I have been working hard, listening to constituents and advocating strongly on their behalf. I have listened to a variety of issues and concerns and have never turned anyone away regardless of their political stripe, and have even addressed concerns from some folks outside of my constituency. I have recognized and spoken about my constituents in the legislature. I have traveled to all the communities in the riding over the past 6 years, listening and speaking with folks. I have responded to their phone calls, emails, helped them get the services they needed, taken their concerns to the appropriate ministers, and done follow-ups to get them answers. Not all the answers they get are what they want to hear, but they do know that I have worked hard on their behalf. I have built many connections and partnerships with organizations and services in this constituency and rural communities, which has allowed me to work cooperatively with local city, RM and town councils, all the school boards, and nonprofits to advocate for changes to government policies, funding, and joint agreements. I believe actions speak louder than words, and under the strong leadership of Premier Scott Moe and the Saskatchewan Party, this province has seen a growing population, strong job creation, lowest unemployment rate in the country, a strong investment into new hospitals, new schools, new long-term care homes, 900 more doctors, 4,000 new nurses, 1,307 more teachers, hundreds of new childcare spaces, invested in the rebuilding of our highways, worked with our municipalities on a sustainable and predictable funding formula, funded new community lagoons and wastewater treatment facilities, added supports for our more vulnerable with new housing, provided additional supports and funding for mental health and addiction beds, built a new Saskatchewan Children's Hospital, funded new CT scanners and other equipment in our hospitals, listened to our citizens and addressed real crime with additional officers and special tactical teams, created partnerships with our First Nations on providing supports and skill development opportunities, supported our oil and gas sector by standing up for pipelines in opposition on the federal government's imposed carbon tax, and the list goes on. This is the track record of a strong, listening and caring Saskatchewan Party government who believes in the heart and soul of this great province and its people. Our election platform continues to invest in the people of Saskatchewan, making life more affordable for families. So the question in this general election is, who do you trust to lead this province? A Sask Party government with a track record of strong investment and supports for the people and a commitment to balanced budgets, or an NDP government with a dismal and destructive track record wherever they go? Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. So one more time for our viewers at home, I will, the email address to send questions is skforum, F-O-R-U-M, at lloydminsterchamber.com. So we'll get into those questions now. Our first one is on the topic of the economy. Prior to COVID-19, Saskatchewan economy was already challenged by low commodity prices and business and consumer, and a low consumer confidence. The economic lockdown associated with COVID-19 has certainly exacerbated these challenges. As we move forward, what is your party's economic recovery plan going forward? And what role do you see the province's business community playing in this plan? So I will start with Steve.
Thank you, John. As far as economics, the economy of our province, the Buffalo Party believes that the first order of business must be the removal of the National Transfer Payment Program. The National Transfer Payment Program, in our opinion, is extremely skewed toward the eastern provinces. To give you an example of it, we know that the province of Quebec does not put their national resource revenue into that calculation, which basically means that the electricity that they sell to New York State from the James Bay project, the gold that they mine out of the Val-d'Or area, these products are not calculated in that system. Now, I dare you to imagine, if you can, if Saskatchewan did not put our natural resources into that calculation. Let's take the oil and gas revenue out. Let's take the potash revenue out. Let's take the revenue from uranium out. That's just three big ones. Saskatchewan wouldn't have much left in that calculation. They want to talk equality. Equalization is the key word to this. If we can't scrap this system, then at least make it equal. Thank you.
Thank you. And to all the candidates, if at any point you need me to re-ask the question, don't hesitate to ask. Next, we'll go to Colleen Young.
The Saskatchewan Party's goal is to ensure that all Saskatchewan people share in the benefits of economic growth, to secure our province's future and to improve the quality of life for everyone in our province, and to ensure that Saskatchewan remains strong. Prior to COVID, yes, we did see some of our resources drop, but our government has added a $2 billion stimulus to our already $7.5 billion infrastructure plan that will see construction jobs and investment in this province to help grow our economy and get people working again. We are also working strongly to expand our global markets. We are opening offices in India, Singapore, and Japan in order to grow our global exports and our global markets. And we are pleased that, we have been able to work with the federal governments on advanced payment programs that will help support some of these opportunities in order to create jobs and infrastructure building within Saskatchewan.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
The NDP party has many excellent plans for rebuilding the Saskatchewan economy. The first thing I want to say before I get into those, though, relevant to Lloydminster and area, is I want to clear up a very common misconception about the Saskatchewan NDP party. Some people have a mistaken belief that we are an anti-oil, anti-pipeline party, and we are not. The Saskatchewan NDP party is pro-oil and indeed pro-pipeline. We understand the importance of oil to Saskatchewan and especially to Lloydminster, and we believe pipelines are very important and the safest way to get oil to markets right now. That said, we would like to see our reliance on that one source of income, that one big piece of our economy, to be lessened so that we don't have the booms and the busts that we've always had in Lloydminster. And so we would like, one of the things we would like to do is develop alternative energy sources using other resources that we have. We have other resources in Saskatchewan we don't use. That's an example of a thing we would like to do. We also plan to rebuild Saskatchewan infrastructure that has been neglected in recent years, and we want to do that using a Sask first procurement policy where we focus on using Saskatchewan workers and Saskatchewan companies to build Saskatchewan infrastructure so that we boost the economy right down from the ground, or up from the ground, so to speak, pardon me. We also have very specific plans like removing PST on construction, which I've heard residents of this riding speak about, a Rural Reconnect program, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is on
Rebuttal?
rebuttal. Yep, go ahead, Colleen.
I want people to remember this. Do not believe the NDP when they say they support the oil and gas sector and pipelines. They push back strong on that many times over and over again in the legislature, and Ryan Miley, their leader, has spoken at anti-pipeline rallies. His caucus support a job-killing, industry-killing carbon tax that hurts families, farmers, businesses, and industries. And let's remember that the NDP and Greens are the ones propping up our corrupt federal Liberals who do not support the strict regulations that are already in place for pipeline construction in this country.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that?
Yep, you get a rebuttal as well.
So I feel like I was more or less just called a liar, and I don't appreciate that. When I say the NDP policy is pro-pipeline, it is pro-pipeline. There have been several recent announcements to that effect. You can find it in writing if you would like to see it in writing. It is there in writing. Just because somebody speaks to people who are against something, I mean, we're not all on the same page here and we're still talking. So just because you spoke at a rally against something doesn't mean that that's what you believe. It means that those are people you want to speak to. So I don't think that is really relevant. And I think that Ryan Miley has not been lying in the media, and I have not been lying either, and I don't believe anybody should say, don't believe what Colleen Morel-Henning just said.
Okay, thank you. Next question regarding candidate platforms. We'll leave it right there, Cody. Many candidates have talked about prioritizing needs over wants. I'd like to know what issues and items they feel are the needs and what are the wants. And we'll start with you, Colleen Henning.
Sorry, could I ask you to repeat that question?
Yep. Many candidates have talked about prioritizing needs over wants. I would like to know what issues and items you feel are needs and what are wants in your platform.
Okay. I think that needs are economic development is a big need. Healthcare is another big need that we haven't talked about yet. A particular example that, well, there are a couple of them. One is better funding and better supports and programming for mental health issues and for addictions issues. That's an example of a need that I think is very relevant in this community. And during this COVID era, we've all seen overdoses increasing. I'm sure I'm not the only one here who's known people who've suffered the loss of their children through that. So those are examples of needs. Also, meeting the needs of seniors better. We want to have the best home care program in Canada. That is one of our goals because people want to be able to stay at home and it's better for people to be able to stay at home. That's another example of a need. Other needs, in order for people to be able to be productive members of our society economically, and also for health and safety, we need to make sure that everyone in Saskatchewan and in our riding has safe and reliable roads, has safe and reliable internet and cell service. We do not have that everywhere in this riding. Some of the roads to the north of here are appallingly bad and at times impassable, and there are communities to the north of here that do not have reliable internet or cell phone service. That's an economic issue, a health issue, and a safety issue. So those are some examples of clear needs in this riding. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
The question of what do we need basically comes down to Saskatchewan first. These are our resources. These are our people. This is our part of the country. We need to take control of it. And this is very simply not a question. It is simply a fact that we need to continue. We need to get back to our lives. An example of that is our power plants down at Estevan and Coronac. We have the carbon capture technology almost figured out to an absolute science. It's getting cheaper every day for them to work that. And yet Ottawa coughs and says we are mandating that you shut down these coal-fired power plants, and we're doing it. The Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan is going to just reverse that. Those are our power plants, not Ottawa's. Ottawa, get your fingers out of my pocket. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Young?
I think the one most important need right now coming through this COVID is to get people back to work and get our economy up and running again, and making life more affordable for families. Our platform includes a number of things that will help make life more affordable for families and get our small businesses operating better than they are right now, and that was a small business tax reduction that we have introduced. We've also have put in our platform supports for our seniors, and that includes 180 new continuing care aides will be hired to work in long-term care facilities, and 120 new continuing care aides will be added to provide home care services through the province, as well as increasing the basic income for our seniors from the $270 to the $360 a month. Under the NDP, they never increased their basic income from $90 in the 16 years they were in power. We have been increasing it, and we will continue to support our seniors. We're also removing the intercity ambulance costs to our seniors to help make life more affordable for them as well. Healthcare in this community, I've been advocating for. It is a bit of a challenge as we work within 2 provinces that fund our healthcare, but I've continuously advocated and worked hard on behalf of this community to ensure that our hospital gets funding in order to do new rentals, and you probably have seen that lately, that there is just under $200 million going to improve equipment and things in our hospital, as well as services for mental health and addictions in this community I've been working hard on.
Thank you. Next question is on nuclear power. What is your party's position on the development of nuclear power in Saskatchewan? We'll start with Colleen Young.
SaskPower has been involved in a committee that has been looking at diversifying our power sources. Over the years, they have added other forms of energy, such as wind and solar, and will continue to add that to our source base. But they have also been working with a number of companies and committees across this country to look at small nuclear reactors. We have the ability to do that here. There is research going on that shows these small nuclear reactors are more efficient, that provide a great source of power. We have an abundance of uranium in this province, and it is something that we have decided it's time to look back at again. I know in the past it was something that was considered, but the economy at the time and the people at the time were not prepared to go that way. But I think we've reached a point where diversifying into uranium production into small nuclear power reactors is something that is necessary in order to diversify our electrical resource in this province.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
Nuclear power is not a focus or part of our plans at this time. We are focused on wind and solar power. We have excellent wind and solar opportunities, as anyone who's stepped outside in Lloydminster in the last week would know. Also geothermal and biomass. And we plan to work with SaskPower to make Saskatchewan a leader in geothermal power production, actually. We want to move to 50% renewable and non-emitting electricity by 2030. And geothermal power production is one of the ways we want to do that. So that is our focus in terms of alternative energy sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
As far as nuclear power is concerned, my personal thought, bring it on. Bring them all on. Bring them all online, but why should we shut down the system that we already have that works? Add to it. We can become a major player in the export of electricity. As far as the renewables, as a former long-distance truck driver and heavy haul, I don't call myself an expert, but that was what I did, was dealt with the big, fat, and ugly. I've hauled the parts and pieces for the wind towers. This is not a cheap venture. This has a very large carbon footprint, if you want to speak of that. And I have found out recently that it becomes even a worse issue in the U.S., down in the state of Iowa. There are some of the wind towers that are now aged out and finished. So they're dismantling them, and the blades themselves, those big blades that go round and round and round, are a couple 100 feet long and such stuff. The only way that they can do something with them is to bury them in the ground. I don't see that technology working well at this time. It needs more study, it needs more work. Solar, on the other hand, solar has its option too. But I'm finding from people who have it, without government subsidies, it's not viable. We have what we need.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. How does your party envision Indigenous engagement within a larger government and Crown procurement strategy? How would this be operationalized in terms of specific actions? Steve?
Indigenous issues. There's a hot potato, but for me, it's quite simple. I grew up 4 miles from one of the larger reserves in Saskatchewan. Some of my best friends are Indigenous peoples. And I look at it this way. For years now, the Indigenous peoples of Canada and Saskatchewan have been trying to become self-governing. Well, welcome to the head of the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan. I'm not the head, but I'm part of that body. We are also trying to deal with self-government. Saskatchewan needs self-government. The Indigenous people have been after it for years. I think we can work together with them. And why not? Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Young.
The Saskatchewan Party is committed to improving the education and employment outcomes of our First Nations and Métis people, and we will continue to engage with tribal councils, individual First Nations and First Nations businesses to increase employment and engagement in the economy. Recently, I have been advocating and working with our First Nations company, oil and gas company from Onion Lake, in helping to support them through this pandemic. They have received some work on the abandonment wells and inactive wells funding that recently was announced. And we have also, as a province and as a government, worked with our First Nations people up around the Pine House area on power generations with their hydro. So there's many opportunities to work with our First Nations, and we have been consulting with them and working with them even on the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology and the Gabriel Dumont Institute in order to provide them with support and funding to help them train and get their people the skills that they need in order to get jobs out in our economy.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
Could I get you to repeat that question?
You bet. How does your party envision Indigenous engagement within a larger government and Crown procurement strategy? How would this be operationalized in terms of specific actions?
Right. Okay. I thought that was what the question was. So it's kind of looking at a larger scale. It's interesting to have that question because I had a conversation on that subject with some people in this riding earlier today, and I think the conclusion we came to and what I believe on that subject is that I would first have to find out how, for example, the First Nations communities in our area envisage that. I don't need to, I'm not going to sit here and say, I think we will work with them and help them do X and Y and Z. No, they can tell me what they think I hate even saying it like that. The leadership in the First Nations communities and in the First Nations organizations and in the other Indigenous organizations, such as the Métis organizations in Saskatchewan, we can sit down together and I can learn about how they would like to be participating in government procurement. That is how I see that. Rather than in terms of me just sitting here and saying what I would be doing without even listening first to hear how it's working now and what the opinions of the relevant parties are about how it's working now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is on oil and gas. Saskatchewan is one of the most trade-dependent provinces in one of the most trade-dependent nations of the world. About 70% of our GDP is trade exposed. While this export-oriented model offers us a tremendous standard of living, it also makes us highly susceptible to events outside of our borders. In light of COVID-19, how would your government manage associated supply chain risks, and what would it do to foster supply chain resiliency? I will start with Steve.
How would we deal with, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Saskatchewan is one of the most trade-dependent provinces and one of the most trade-dependent nations in the world. 70% of our GDP is trade exposed. While the export-oriented model offers us tremendous living, it also makes us very susceptible to events outside of our borders. In light of COVID-19, how would your government manage associated supply chain risks, and what would it do to foster supply chain resiliency?
Thank you. As far as it goes, in light of COVID-19, our official line on that is to get us back, get us opened up. Bring it back. As far as the dependence upon export markets, absolutely, we are dependent upon export markets. But we're exporting the wrong product. We're exporting crude oil. We're exporting yellow cake. We're exporting durum instead of finishing these products. There's no reason why we can't be exporting diesel fuel and gasoline instead. There's no reason why we can't put a durum plant, a plant to make spaghetti out of durum. Why can't we do this? Export the finished product. Probably we far less product to move. The extra waste of it, let's take canola as an example. You take the canola seed, you crush it, it becomes canola oil and canola meal. You've got two finished products. One is a cattle feed, one is a cooking oil. Let's sell those instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Henning?
As I understand it, the question was about supply chain resiliency, and with reference to the fact that we are a very trade-dependent province in a trade-dependent nation. And it seems to me that an important factor is to not be too dependent on any one particular or one or two particular trading partners. So for example, historically, the US is our largest trading partner, of course, and we've also traded a lot with China. So just in a general way, to reduce dependency on particular trading partners and to diversify in terms of who we are trading with would seem to be an important piece of building some safeguards into that for events like COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Young?
As I mentioned in my opening remarks, one of the things is that we are an export-dependent province and that we do have the fuel, food, and fertilizer that the world needs. And that is why we created the Ministry of Trade and Export Development to maintain and grow relationships with our current export markets while recognizing our need to diversify our markets worldwide. That's why we are opening up markets in Japan and in Singapore and India, because they are in need of the products that we produce here in Saskatchewan. And we will see an increase in those things as well. We also are the second largest agri-food exporting province. 1.5 billion in new agri-food exports are expected once the Canadian-European Union Free Trade Agreement is fully implemented. We are looking at markets within Mexico and Brazil and China as well that already accepts a lot of our canola products here from Saskatchewan. So those are international markets that we are looking to open up because we know that the world needs what we produce and what we have.
Thank you. Next question is on health. Dating back to 2014, a bi-provincial health services committee was established to collaborate and implement the recommendations from Lloydminster Integrated Health Services and Facility Infrastructure Needs Assessment. To date, very few, if any, of the recommendations have been carried out, and the committee has almost been completely inactive. If elected, what would you do to get the bi-provincial committee operating transparently and moving towards achieving the recommendations from the report? And we will start with Colleen.
The bi-provincial working group. I just recently, in the last year, reappointed people to the bi-provincial working group. There was a new chair appointed as well, because yes, we didn't see as much activity as we'd like based on those recommendations that were put forward. That committee has been active and are pushing forward some of the agenda items that hadn't been dealt with in the past. I have met with them on a number of occasions and have worked with them, as well as representatives from the Alberta government and Saskatchewan government and SHA, on a number of the topics that need to be changed and need to be funded properly in order to support the healthcare needs of this community. We serve a very large area. It isn't just the city of Lloydminster, and the ambulance services, as well as all of the doctor services and healthcare services in this community, need to be changed and adjusted so that all the people benefit from healthcare within our community at the same level. That is something I've been strongly advocating and working with our ministers in the past, and I will continue to do that and work with the bi-provincial working group to see that the recommendations move forward.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
This is a very specific topic that I think someone in government would know more about than I do, but I can certainly speak to what it sounds like the underlying issue might be, which is the role of an MLA and in making sure that the government is paying close attention to your riding, that things are happening in a timely fashion, that information is coming back to the people in your riding from the government on matters that are of interest to the people in your riding. It sounds a bit like the person who wrote the question maybe felt like that wasn't happening here. So in a general way, when I am an MLA, I would be sure to be following up on these things and making sure that the lines of communication are open in both directions, but also that things are not allowed to lapse as it appears there may have been a bit of a sort of a lag there where nothing much was happening. Making sure that something like that doesn't happen with a committee that is so important, because we all know that as a bi-provincial community, it's come up several times. I've heard other people here tonight say it, bi-provincial, bi-provincial. Well, if we know we're a bi-provincial community, then we need to be paying very close attention to a committee that is designed to address those issues and make sure it's not falling by the wayside. And that is something that I would be sure to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
The city of Lloydminster and surrounding area, this constituency, the MDs around us in Alberta, we're in a unique position in this continent. And I say the continent, not just the country. We're the only city in this continent that actually sits in two jurisdictions. I have to agree with Colleen Henning that this is not something that I understand directly. I do understand that we have to work with those other jurisdictions in this regard, because we have one hospital. It happens to be in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, but the services are provided all around for all around us. I guess for myself, at one time I was involved with the exhibition grounds in the Battlefords, and therefore had some contact with the people of this organization. So it is confusing because you're dealing with two different provinces, but it can be done. I wasn't aware that there was a bi-provincial committee as such to look after this. I think it's a good thing. We have to have it because the people of this constituency, the MDs around us, the Alberta side of the city, the other Saskatchewan zones that are close by, we all need this operation to work. We all need that hospital.
Thank you. Next question is on the economy. Research undertaken by the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce suggests that the province's tax system is becoming increasingly uncompetitive and not optimized for promoting much-needed business investment. If your party were to form government or stay in government, what measures will it enact around business tax policy to help spur growth? We'll start with Steve.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look into my notes here because we actually, in our platform, have that right in here. We intend to make Saskatchewan easier for investors to come here. As I've mentioned before, things like taking durum wheat, turning it into pasta. These are not fly-by-night, easy, small dollar situations. These are, I mean, we're going to need investors to put their money up front. And so we're going to give them a tax break. Okay, I'm not a numbers person, so I don't understand this. Basically, the 5-year program, in the first year, we'll give them a 10% tax break. Second year, 15, whoop, nope, I'm looking at the wrong piece. Here we go. Here we go. No, anyway, it's in here. People can find this. This is on our website, and if you're interested, take a look. I can't find the particular one, but the idea is to bring these small and medium manufacturers, processors of all of our raw products into this province and help them to make this viable. In exchange for that, we're going to have a whole lot of our people working, taxpayers working. Good paying jobs pay good taxes. We all complain about paying taxes, but every one of us has to. You want the services, you have to pay for them. We can give those small to mediums the break they need to start.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
The NDP has several specific ideas in its platform to support business in Saskatchewan. Obviously, you can do it. You can help businesses have the funding they need, the resources they need by either reducing their taxes or by directly supporting them. So I'll address both sides of that. So one thing we want to do is institute a job creators plan to support local small businesses as they adapt to the $15 an hour minimum wage that we are proposing. Lloydminster is being on the border. That's another example. We have a $15 minimum wage on one side and not on the other, and that's an issue that is very often brought up to me on the doorstep, that people want the $15 minimum wage. So we plan to support businesses as they adapt to it. We also plan to reinstate startup loans for rural small businesses. Rural includes Lloydminster. We mean outside of the large centers, Saskatoon and Regina. So that is another example of how we plan to promote business investment in Saskatchewan, which was what the question asked about, business investment. We have one specific tax credit that we're interested in, and we want to bring back the film employment tax credit to bring film industry back to Saskatchewan. That was an important industry here that is basically gone. I was talking to someone on a doorstep about that the other day because of that tax credit being eliminated. We also want to reduce the craft beer levy, and a levy is of course a form of tax, so we want to reduce that one to help our producers compete across the country. I mean, we even have that in Lloydminster now. That's a growing industry in Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Young.
The Saskatchewan Party is committed to keeping taxes low to encourage investment and economic growth and make life more affordable for Saskatchewan families. A re-elected Saskatchewan Party government will support small businesses and Saskatchewan's economic recovery by reducing small business taxes for the next 3 years. To support Saskatchewan small businesses as they sustain operations and move forward from the pandemic to retain and hire new employees and grow their businesses, we will reduce the small business tax rate from 2% to 0% beginning October 1st, 2020. We will move the small business tax rate then to 1% beginning July 1st, 2022, and then move the small business tax rate back to its current 2% beginning July 1st, 2023. This reduction will benefit about 31,000 small businesses, saving them over $189 million in provincial taxes over the next 3 years, an average savings of over $6,100 per Saskatchewan small business. The amount which small business can earn at the small business tax rate is $600,000, and this is the highest threshold in Canada. So the combination of low small business tax rates and the highest small business income tax threshold will make Saskatchewan the best place in Canada to start and grow a small business.
Thank you. Just a reminder for those joining us live on our feed, if you'd like to get a question in, the email is skforum@lloydminsterchamber.com. We'll be probably taking questions for about another 20 minutes, so if you want to get your question in. Next question is on education. The Saskatchewan business community has long advocated for the teaching of financial literacy in K-12 curriculum and recently scored an advocacy win with the announcement earlier this year of financial literacy courses being offered as an elective for grade 11 and 12. Despite this success, gaps around middle school offerings and teaching capacity remain. If your party were to form or stay in government, would it build upon these efforts? If so, how? And we will start with Colleen Young.
Absolutely, we will build upon these efforts. We were the government that brought in financial literacy programs to our schools and have been supporting that for our students. That is a real benefit to them as they learn in high school how to function on their own when they get out into the world in order to, follow their expenses and, work and make money. They need to have that financial literacy to be able to balance their budgets. Will we support it? Absolutely. We've already increased our teachers' supports in this province, even through this pandemic, by adding 443 more support teachers. But for this specific program, this is something that we believe is very valuable to our students, and will continue to look at what supports are needed to ensure that this program moves forward in our school system.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
I think that this question is you couldn't say no to it. How could you not support financial literacy? And students ask for it sometimes. So the question is, why has it been such a long time coming? Because the curriculum in Saskatchewan is controlled by the Saskatchewan government. It might have been so long coming because of the lack of funding for curriculum development to the Saskatchewan government, which has made many updated curriculums very long in coming. And so that a Saskatchewan teacher, I'm aware that we are operating from some exceedingly old curriculums, some of them, oh boy, going quite a ways back into the last millennium. While I would like to see financial literacy in schools expanded upon, I do think there are other curriculums as well that are slated to be updated, and that the resources need to be provided for curriculum development, so that those courses are not just sitting there with containing outdated content and just not meeting the needs of students and communities and the Saskatchewan society as it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
As far as our education system goes, who can say that, no, we don't need more funding? Who can possibly even think that way? Our teachers are up against the wall. They are, they're the person who takes over when the parents are finished with being very young children. They are to help our parents to turn those children into adults. The Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan believes that the education system needs to get back to the fundamentals. Basically, it comes down to reading, writing, history, math, and sciences. My wife works in a grocery store, and there's nothing frustrates her worse than when one of these high school students gets a part-time job at the store, and the computerized till tells her or him exactly how much change to give me. And if that machine doesn't, if she pushes the wrong button and it just comes up with the total, I give her $20 for $9.45 worth of product. They very often can't count back change to me. This is wrong. We need to get back to these fundamentals. We need to know how to read, to write, to do our gazintas, to do our mathematical calculations. Physics, we don't need to go there, not for most of us. But we do need to be able to add and subtract.
Thank you.
A rebuttal.
Yep.
The Ministry of Education is going to receive $2.57 billion in 2021 to its budget, and school divisions will receive $1.94 billion in school operating funding, the largest school division operating funding in the history of this province. That's an increase of $42 million just since last year. Operating funding in school divisions is up 37% since 2007, while enrollment is only up 15%. And I want to remind people that we've added 1,307 more classroom teachers in the province since 2007, and added childcare spaces within all of our schools as well, is to support many of our children. I want to remind people, the NDP in this province closed 176 schools. That's an average of one school per month. They lost over 400 teachers in 6 years. And the enrollment declined by 16% because people were leaving this province.
Thank you. Next question is on labor. What is your party's plan around the labor market issues to address current skills gaps between skills and competency employers are looking for versus what recent graduates currently possess? More broadly, what kinds of labor market policies would your government enact to prepare Saskatchewan businesses and workers for the economy in post-pandemic era? And we will start with Steve.
The questions keep mentioning the post-pandemic situation. First of all, I don't believe that we are in a pandemic. That was supposed to be 15 days. After that, it's supposed to have gone through a legal channel to find out whether it continues or not. It has never gone there. As far as the job markets, the people are looking for good paying jobs. They deserve to have a realistic reason to get out of bed in the morning. Am I going to be able to go to work tomorrow? These are the questions that people are asking. How are we going to fix that? We bring in more businesses. Make it workable so the investors can bring their money to Saskatchewan. Start new businesses. Let's also help the existing businesses. These are the people who hire the people and give them those meanings to get out of bed in the morning. The reason to go and feel good about yourself. At the end of the day, you may go home tired, but you know what? You've done something. You've accomplished something. That's what Saskatchewan people want. They want to know that their life means something. And that's basically what it comes down to. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Henning?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yep. So it's on labor. What is your party's plan around labor market issues to address the current skill gaps between what skills and competency employers are looking for versus what recent graduates currently possess? More broadly, what kinds of labor market policies would your government enact to prepare Saskatchewan businesses and workers for the economy in a post-pandemic era?
I think the first part of the question is sort of too large to think purely post-pandemic, but in terms of meeting the labor market requirements, an obvious move is to support post-secondary education and training programs. An example would be, say teachers, not cut programs. The Saskatchewan Party recently cut NORTEP, the Northern Teachers Education Program, which had been very successful for many years and was an important program, especially to Indigenous peoples in northern Saskatchewan. I talked to an Indigenous gentleman today who said he wouldn't have become a teacher without that program. So not cutting is the first place you go, not cutting training programs. And then looking at what training programs are needed for the future and especially funding those. One particular area that the NDP party is interested in is the tech sector, and we want to make the tech sector in Saskatchewan more competitive with other jurisdictions, and that would require working with that sector to see what is needed in terms of additional training and what we can do to make that happen. Those are examples of how the NDP would work towards that. And of course, I've mentioned earlier, making sure everyone has the resources they need to be able to participate. A lot of education is online now. Everybody needs to have adequate internet service for that. People need good roads to get to schools, things like that.
Thank you. Colleen Young?
The Saskatchewan Party is committed to investing in higher education, skills training, and the knowledge economy, and providing the best post-secondary learning environment for Saskatchewan students so they have the opportunity to build the skills that they need in order to join our workforce and contribute to our economy. As I mentioned before, under the NDP, Saskatchewan suffered from a population decline, losing thousands and thousands of our students and residents, and those skills left our province. We've been reinvesting back into them, and we've added our graduate retention program, which provides graduates with up to $20,000 in tax credits if they live and work in Saskatchewan. And we've also added the addition of our graduate retention program, as well as the Advantage Scholarship Program, which we recently in our platform are increasing those amounts as well. The Gabriel Dumont Institute and the Saskatchewan Institute of Indian and Indigenous Technology is another area where we as a province have supported. This gives our Indigenous people the ability to be trained to develop the skills and the knowledge they need and able to go out and into our workforce and contribute to the economy. I was happy and honored to be able to support the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology and the Minister of Advanced Education in the opening of one of those sub and offices here in Lloydminster at the Native Friendship Centre, and there are students attending and will benefit from this great program here in Saskatchewan.
Thank you. Next question.
Can I
Yep,
reply?
go ahead.
I'd just like to make reference to the Ms. Young's comment about Saskatchewan losing population under the NDP in the past. Yes, that did happen. What I think is maybe more relevant is that Saskatchewan has been losing population under the Sask Party in the last year. So we don't need to look a long ways back to when the NDP was last in power. We can just look back to this last year, and Saskatchewan is actively losing people right now under the governance of the Sask Party. And in terms of education, which she connected that to closing schools and losing population. There has been a shift in Saskatchewan, and so some rural schools were closed.
Thank you. Colleen, rebuttal?
We have not been losing people in this province. In the last year, we've gained over 74,000 people. The NDP did not believe that we could reach over 1 million people in this province when they were in power. It is the Saskatchewan government who has invested in the people of this province, who has created jobs, created opportunities for investors and industries to come here so that our population could grow. We are now over 1.16 million people in this province, and very proud of that. So the fact that we are losing people is wrong. We are gaining people. COVID may have changed. A few people have had to go to find work elsewhere right now because of businesses that don't have the ability to keep employees, but the population in Saskatchewan under a Saskatchewan Party government has grown.
Thank you. Next question is on internet. It can be said that COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing economic disruption has caused accelerated and intensified trends that were already in play before the crisis, most notably the trend towards a digital economy and the dramatic effect between urban and rural internet services available. If your party were to form government or stay in government, how would it respond to a great acceleration currently before us? We'll start with Colleen.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, Colleen Young.
Oh, it's confusing. You keep saying that. We're not the same person.
Sorry, Colleen Young.
We have invested as a government and through SaskTel into a number of small rural community towers over the last couple of years, 91 small rural community towers for better internet and cell service and bandwidth have been erected in this province, and we continue to invest in that. Just recently, we announced 74 macro towers in this province, with one of them coming to this constituency. It'll be along Highway Range Road 797 up near the Fort Pitt Hutterite Colony. And so that is there to help provide better internet service, bandwidth, and cell service for customers. It is expensive to invest in these towers. It's $1 million per tower, as well as the technology that is added to it. So SaskTel makes decisions around where they put these towers based on the density of their population and recovery of costs and expenses that goes along with that. So we have increased our bandwidth, and we have increased internet services across this province, and we will continue to do that for the people of this province, because we know that technology is vital, not just in our schools, in our hospitals, in our own homes, but with our businesses. And more of them are maybe working from home right now and need that connectivity. So we continue to improve on it and work within SaskTel and TELUS and Bell, who are also working together with them in order to improve our technology and create the opportunity for 5G in our province.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm sorry, John. I was born with a hearing impairment. I didn't hear the question.
Okay, no problem. With the COVID pandemic and ensuing economic disruption, it's caused an accelerated and intensified trend that was already in play before the crisis. Most notably, the trend towards a digital economy and the dramatic difference between urban and rural internet services available. If your party were to form government, how would it respond to the great acceleration currently before us?
I'm somewhat at a loss on this. Up until this campaign started, I was still using a flip phone. I'm an old guy. As I look around the room, I'm probably the senior member in this room today. And technology, I know, has passed me by, and I know it's necessary for the next generation and the people coming up behind me. It is also a part of why I semi-retired from my business, because I couldn't keep up. So therefore, I'm going to just have to let this one go by, because I really don't understand the technologies of today. I don't understand the phone that I now carry around. I don't understand how these cameras can be operational. The internet system, yeah, I can go www.dumbass, here we go, and find probably a picture of me. That's as far as it goes with me. I really would have to, if we have people in government, that's going to have to be someone else's department, because I know that I'm not capable of dealing with that.
Okay, thank you. Colleen Henning?
Well, I've touched on this topic before, and it's very dear to my heart, because people who do not have internet access, cell phone access that they need, they are not safe, their health is not secure, and they cannot fully participate in the Saskatchewan economy. And I don't think it stopped being optional a long time ago. The government we have now is still treating it as optional. There are people in northern Saskatchewan who do not have affordable access to reliable services. There are plenty of those people, and that includes some First Nations communities, even in our riding. And it's simply unacceptable, so we would do whatever. It is an official plank in our platform, and we would do whatever we had to do to make sure that it changed. It is not enough to say, well, SaskTel does it where it's viable based on the number of people. SaskTel, who controls SaskTel? Like I don't think, I'm pretty sure SaskTel has something to do with the Sask government, if I'm not mistaken. And even, yes, and the government can work with other parties, but the government has the responsibility to make sure that it happens. It's not optional. Even the United Nations has talked about the fact that everyone, everywhere needs access to the internet. How can you look for jobs anymore without access to the internet? How can you apply for jobs without access to the internet? How can you phone for an ambulance without cell service?
Okay, thank you. Next question is on oil and gas. What actions would your party take to counter Ottawa's constitutional overreach of provincial powers? One example would be Bill C-69. And we'll start with Colleen Henning.
You said overreach of the federal government?
Yeah.
I said to someone the other day, yelling wouldn't help, because I was looking at another party's policies, and it's like, we will tell the federal government. No, we will work with the federal government. We will advocate with the federal government. We will discuss with the federal government. We will clarify who has responsibilities for what, who has rights to what. That is how we would do it, because that is how you work. If you're working government to government, business to business, individual to individual, that is how you actually get things accomplished. And one thing, federal governments and provincial governments do have distinct roles, and the person who wrote that question clearly understands that, but sometimes some other people seem less clear on that subject. So that is something to keep in mind, that sometimes it's about sorting out jurisdiction and just sorting out the finer points. It doesn't have to always be confrontational. And I think that being willing to work in a non-confrontational pattern and being willing to work with people rather than against people would be critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Young.
Well, as you know, our government, the Sask Party government, has stood up and spoken in favor of our oil and gas sector and has supported them throughout. Pipelines were about to be built in this province and should have moved ahead. The Energy East, the Trans Mountain one, the TMX, and it's the federal government who stopped that. We have the most stringent environment and strict oil and pipeline regulations in this country. We, as a government, have the jurisdiction, we believe, in order to be able to proceed with those pipelines. And that is why we have challenged the federal government, and it has gone to the Supreme Court. As you know, recently, those hearings were just held here in September, and we are waiting for an answer from them as to whether or not we can move ahead with those pipelines and proceed with creating jobs and the opportunity for our oil and gas sector to get its product to Tidewater. This is very important. It's a very valuable and important industry and an export product for our economy, and we need to support them. And when the federal government isn't willing to listen, then yes, we have to stand up and challenge them in the courts. And that is exactly what we're doing in Saskatchewan.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, this hits right into the wheelhouse that I've been saying all night. We at the Buffalo Party believe that these things are provincial jurisdiction. The autonomy of Saskatchewan within Canada, fine. Colleen Young spoke about the pipeline issues. It's come to my attention that if we were to go the direction of separation, which is not in our immediate future, it would be very, very easy for us to then push that pipeline through, because under international law, a landlocked country has to have access to tidewater. That's the situation in a lot of the countries in Europe. They have to have, by law, access to tidewater. So as a province, why is it that Ottawa and Victoria and whoever, wherever else, why is it that they can stop us from putting that pipeline through? We are part of a family. We're not little children anymore. We are adult child in this family, and we should be treated as such. We should be able to run our own operation. We should be able to look after ourselves. And by doing that, then we look after our parents, in this case being the federal government. But they shouldn't be able to tell us what to do anymore.
Thank you. Next question is on healthcare and police. Recognizing Lloydminster straddles the bi-provincial border, or straddles the border, what can your party do to help reduce conflicts in protocols between the provinces, for example, health, police, and education? And we will start with Steve.
Okay, once again, I didn't hear you.
Okay. Recognizing Lloydminster straddles the provincial border, what can your party do to help reduce conflicts in protocols and increase funding between the provinces in health, police, and education?
Lloydminster, once again, is in a very unique situation. I don't know all the answers. Of course, we need to sit down with the Alberta governments, the municipal governments, the provincial government, because we have this unique situation. We are the only city that actually has 2 jurisdictions in it. It's not going to be an easy thing. But we do need to sit down with them as far as our health care. I mean, we have, according to what I've heard tonight, this committee organized to work on that, which is not being very well utilized. Other departments need to be doing the same thing, because, once again, we have one city government in 2 provinces. I mean, the tax bases for Alberta are different than Saskatchewan. The wages, so the minimum wage was mentioned, those are different. Somehow we have to come to agreement with this city and the area around it to make this all become a workable plan in different departments, different ways. It's not easy. Nothing is. Especially when you're dealing with 2 different peoples, Albertans and Saskatchewanites. We are neighbors, but we're different. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Henning?
To reduce conflicts in protocols, again, that sounds like a matter of that would require continuing discussion and bringing parties to the table, and a role would likely be one of mediation, and it would involve listening and trying to line up things. Not everything has a simple answer, and some things start with research and learning and listening before you talk. As far as increasing funding, one way to increase funding for Lloydminster is to increase funding on the Saskatchewan side of Lloydminster. And so we do have some specific plans for increasing funding that would be relevant to the Lloydminster area. For example, we have set aside funding specifically for working on anti-gang initiatives. When I've been on the doorstep in Lloydminster, I have heard a few people, more than a few people, mention issues that that relate to gang activity in this riding. And so increasing funding for anti-gang initiatives would assist with the costs of policing in this area, and either directly or by reducing the costs of policing in this area, because I think you know, it's not a secret that there is gang activity in Lloydminster and area, and that's one example of a very specific plan, and not just talking generalities that we have.
Thank you. Colleen Young.
Health education and our policing services in this community has always been a big challenge when you're dealing with two different governments and two different provincial funding formulas that fund this community on the basis of population within their province. I have advocated and worked strongly with both the city municipal representatives as well as my counterparts in Alberta on a number of these topics. We need to work harder on the policing services for this community, as when our RCMP moved over from the F Division in Saskatchewan to the K Division, we lost the funding of 2 police officers because it went to the Alberta funding model. And that's something we need to work on to get back, and that is something I have been working with the mayor on and with the ministers in order to find that support for our community, because gang violence is up, lots of things are up. I was very instrumental in working to get both ministers of education to the table when we developed the seamless delivery model for education here in our community, which has worked very well. And I know that there is work to be done on the healthcare issues here in Lloydminster. That bi-provincial working agreement is up for renewal and is being worked on as I speak. And that is something that we need to get both ministers of health to the table. That always seems to be the way things work. It's not just about bringing the bureaucrats to the community to have the conversation, but to get the actual health ministers here, and that's something I'm very strongly going to be advocating for in the next round here.
Thank you. We do have time for one last question. Decisions by institutional investors are increasingly being made through a climate lens. How would your party manage the long-term transition to a low-carbon economy? What role do you see the province's business community playing in this transition? We'll start with Colleen Young.
Can you repeat it? It was...
Yeah. Decisions by institutional investors are increasingly being made through a climate lens. How would your party manage the long-term transition to a low-carbon economy? And what role do you see the province's business community playing in this transition?
Our government put forward in August of about 2018 a prairie resilience plan to the federal government, which was accepted in principle, but has never been able to get full approval on. And that was setting goals and targets on our heavy emitters and to reduce our carbon emissions. We have that in place, and we will continue to push our prairie resilience plan because we believe it is the best plan in order to reduce carbon emissions in our economy. Getting our investors here, we have some very strong economic investors who are very careful about their emissions and their carbon footprint in the province. Just recently, Inland Steel is in the process of building a $12 million plant just outside of Lloydminster here. That's a great investment for jobs and for the economy here, and they will be ensuring that they meet all the environmental standards that they need in creating steel products for around this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Talk about a carbon footprint of our economy comes down to a fine line. Where do we go with renewable resources? Where do we go with working through things that are ever changing? Where do we go with planting trees? I'll take it to my past. Of course, my last truck that I bought had all the bells and whistles of green footprint as such. A clean exhaust was the big thing. These issues had their own issues. It only took a couple of years for those issues with that system to force me to either shut this truck down or delete this stuff, make it go away. Let that diesel engine breathe. That was my choice. And that was the choice I made, was to eliminate, I went away from the green thought. Do I agree with living in a greener society? Yes, absolutely. The cleaner we can make it, the better. But you know what? The carbon that my truck put out into the air through the exhaust is what the trees need to live. It's a circle. If we plant a few trees instead of knocking them down, we win. These are resources that we're, as humans, supposed to use.
Thank you. Colleen Henning?
The NDP in Saskatchewan doesn't plan to wait on the federal government to approve of anything in terms of moving towards cleaner energy. There are things that we can do, that we control. We don't have to make a plan and then say, oh, well, we couldn't do anything because the federal government said we couldn't. There are things we can do and we will do. We want to increase the use of wind and solar resources and geothermal biomass and other clean energy. Specifically, we want to move to 50% renewable and non-emitting electricity by 2030, with a legislated target of 100% emissions-free electricity by 2050. We will do that partly by investing in energy efficiency to make us a leader in Canada instead of lagging behind, which is something that happens when you wait for somebody else to say that you're allowed to change this. We plan to support the protection of wetlands and grasslands, and we're going to empower people, small businesses, municipalities, and First Nations and Métis communities to generate their own power and create a distributed energy grid in Saskatchewan. And we will work with SaskPower to make Saskatchewan a leader in geothermal power production. So those are some very specific things we would do, because as I believe the question said, it's about institutional investors wanting to invest their money in Saskatchewan and wanting Saskatchewan to be have a clean energy policy before they do that, knowing that people people everywhere are concerned about that now. So that's important for them as institutional investors. And we are ready for that, and we are ready to make the province they want.
Thank you. That wraps up our questions. We'll now give 3 minutes for our final remarks, and which is a reverse order of how we started. So we will start with Colleen Young.
Strong leadership and a strong recovery. That's what a re-elected Saskatchewan party can give you. I have worked hard and diligently on your behalf, and if re-elected, will give you the same strong leadership and advocacy that you deserve and require of your government representative. There are many projects and conversations I've been working on with organizations from around the constituency, and I would like to continue to advocate and work on their behalf to see these projects supported and sustained by my government. My opponents here in the other parties have very opposing agendas. I want people to remember the track record of an NDP government, raising taxes 21 times, closing 52 hospitals, 176 schools, and 1,200 long-term care beds, drove our young people, businesses, investors, and industries out of the province. We can't afford and trust Ryan Miley and the NDP. Their track record and their support for their own federal leader, Jagmeet Singh, who is in bed with a corrupt federal Liberal government, says it all. Let's not forget that the NDP and Greens are the ones propping up our corrupt federal Liberal government. Under the leadership of Scott Moe and the Saskatchewan Party, we are focused on investment in people and families and the recovery of our economy. I believe and know that we can and will lead this country in job creation, innovation, advancements in technology, regain a strong resource sector in agriculture and agri-food industry that provides for the world leadership that continues to stand up to the federal government, and above all, a quality of life for all that is affordable and that creates strong families and communities that are the envy of other provinces. After what you've heard here this evening, a re-elected Sask Party government can and will deliver. Since July, I have driven many miles across this constituency, walked many miles, knocked on many doors, and spoken with hundreds of constituents, listening to your concerns and asking for your support. I believe I have shown you that I'm willing to work hard on your behalf, to be your voice in the legislature and government, and to advocate for the supports that make all Lloydminster constituents proud to live in this great province. I truly care about the welfare, livelihood, and needs of my Lloydminster constituents and want to continue working for you. So whether you are voting by a mail-in ballot at the advanced polls from October 20th to the 24th, or at a poll on the 26th, I hope I have earned your respect and confidence, and I humbly ask for your vote. I ask you to vote for trusted leadership. I ask you to vote Colleen Young.
Thank you. Colleen Henning.
At the beginning of this event, I explained who I am and why I will make an excellent MLA for this riding. Now I'd like to highlight some issues that make me passionate about winning this chance to work for you. I've had a chance to mention some of them earlier, but I'll just reiterate some of the ones that I'm particularly passionate about. And I will also say, I think it's really important when you vote to think about the future. One of the other candidates here seems a little bit hung up on the past, on people who were in government a long time ago, MLAs who are probably long retired now, and some of them are, I'm sorry to say, not even with us anymore. A leader who isn't with us anymore. I wasn't there then. Who are we now? And who am I now? That's really the question for you. Who am I now, and what do I want for Lloydminster? So one concern that affects us all in this riding, as I've said, is job and income security. It affects us directly or indirectly during this COVID year, with formerly successful businesses and industries struggling and even failing to survive. But we know Lloydminster was actually struggling before that, wasn't it? Lloydminster has had a lot of ups and downs lately. We've been vulnerable to world oil prices, and we hadn't had time to recover from the last slowdown before COVID hit. As a longtime resident of this area, I say it's time for a change. As I've said before, and it's true, the NDP, the Saskatchewan NDP, is both pro-oil and pro-pipeline, and we understand that oil is essential to the Saskatchewan economy at present, and that pipelines are the best way to bring that oil to markets. We believe we can have as much and more success than the current government has had in doing that. But we need the booms and the busts of oil to end as well. We need to look ahead, diversify energy resources, not just to have cleaner energy and work to halt climate change, but to create good, steady jobs in Lloydminster now and in the future, right here in this riding. And we're going to do that with our Sask First procurement policy, new infrastructure, schools, bridges, hospitals. Also, I want to mention again that our focus on healthcare, working to reduce suicide through a suicide prevention strategy, mental health and addictions, but also specific treatments for opioid and meth programs, and for seniors, the best home care program in Saskatchewan. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Colleen. Steve?
People ask me, why are you doing this? I mean, look at me. As I said before, I'm likely the senior person in this room tonight. I'm 60 years old. I'm looking at retirement. Will I ever retire? Probably not. I'm too active. The semi-retirement that I've been in just about drove me crazy. I guess it comes down to, I have to thank Mr. Justin Trudeau for pushing me into this. I got tired of hearing him take away from us. Someone has to make our governments accountable to the people who put them there. And I believe that the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan is that opportunity. We all know that we're, at the Buffalo Party, is not going to be the majority in our new government. We're hoping to go in there as opposition. The job of the opposition is not to just see what comes across the table and say, no, we can't do that. We believe the job of the opposition is to take a look at what's there and then say, all right, not a bad idea. What if we added this? Would that work for you? We can do that. We don't have to be on the other side. If there's only one side to an issue, why are we fighting? I keep thinking, and I wrote this down this morning just simply because I was sitting there trying to decide what to do today. In my transportation career, I kept thinking, I'm always happy to come home. Why? It's because I believe that Saskatchewan is the greatest place in this continent. The people are still real. The jobs that we do are honest. We are free to do as we please, as long as we don't infringe upon other people's rights. Hey, it's Saskatchewan. If you don't like the weather, blink, it'll change. I came through some snow coming in this evening. Ugh. But that's what it is. Welcome to our home. Why do we here in Saskatchewan keep giving it away? Ottawa coughs in our direction and we stutter. It's time to quit doing that.
Thank you, Steve. Well, that wraps up our candidates forum for the Saskatchewan provincial election in the Lloydminster riding. I'd like to once again say some thank yous. First of all, to our virtual audience who joined us today and asked their questions. Secondly, to the candidates for their commitment and courage in stepping up and making those constituents have a choice on election day. And also Maz Entertainment for doing the live stream. Our media partners for helping get the live stream out to the public. And finally, the Lloydminster exhibition staff for setting up the forum and providing us with a great venue. Be sure to get out on October 26th and vote. It's your right, your privilege, and your responsibility to your province. I now declare the official candidates forum closed. Have a good night.
Thank you.